All right, that's 4 straight wins for Auburn basketball as they continue to roll in SEC play. Welcome into the Auburn Live Basketball Show. I am Justin Hokanson, joined as always by Jay Phillips. Jay, 4 in a row for Auburn basketball after a 1-1 start in conference play. They're 5-1 in league play after a 18-point win at LSU, and then of course the win over Mississippi State last Saturday. We haven't spoken in a week. Thoughts on 4 straight, including that win over LSU, who LSU's a reeling team for sure. But Auburn did what you're supposed to do when you're the better team. They won by 18. What were your thoughts on the Mississippi State win and the LSU win, and kind of where this team is at now at 5-1 in league play?
Yeah, both of the wins were really impressive for several reasons, and both of them were still Auburn not playing quite at its full potential. So it makes you confident that the team's not peaking too early or anything, but they're still gaining some momentum, finding some identity. Um, Both games, were probably the quietest 2-game stretch we've seen from Janai Brome all season, but Wendell Green, Alan Flanagan, Jalen Williams have all been playing really good when they've been in the game. And it's just feels like this team's trending in the right direction, and it's a far cry from where they were 2 weeks ago when we were talking after the Georgia game, and
Yeah.
it seemed like that team was close to falling off the edge, and it was just very uncharacteristic for a Bruce Pearl team and past few teams we've seen in general. And now they look like they're trending right back up. They look as good as they've been all season. So feeling good about Auburn basketball.
Yeah, I think they're, first of all, they're taking advantage of their schedule right now. We've talked about how lopsided their schedule is on the back half. Of their remaining 14 games, 7 as of now are slated quad one games. Quad one games, for those that aren't sure what that terminology is, quad 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are ways that basically the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee will separate games and judge quality wins. So quad one wins are the best wins you can have. They're beating a top 30 team at home. They're beating a top 50 team on a neutral floor, and they're beating a top 75 team, I think, on the road. Quad 2 kind of stretches that back out, where then it's like a top 50 at home, or top 75 on a neutral, or top 100 on the road. So it kind of stretches out. And so quad one wins are, that's kind of what you're judged by. That's the first thing the tournament committee is going to look at when they say, hey, what should you be seeded, or if you're on the bubble, should you get in? Like that's normally a big indicator. So half of Auburn's remaining games are quad one games, including 6 of the last 9. So what Auburn's doing right now is really important. It sounds like, because the back half is so good. The reality is 4 of Auburn's 5 conference wins so far are 4 of the 5 bottom teams in the league right now. LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, and then Mississippi State are all 4 of the 5, and then South Carolina, who Auburn's about to play. So if Auburn wins Saturday, 5 of their 6 conference wins would be the bottom 5 teams in the league so far. And then you've got a Florida and Georgia kind of middle of the pack right now. You're 1-1 there. They haven't played Kentucky, Bama, Tennessee, Missouri, Texas A&M. So it's going to get a lot harder. So keep that in perspective when you're talking about this team and being 5-1. And they've taken care of business, but they've played so far teams that are struggling in league play. Having said that, there is something, I think, to be said about finding yourself, which is really what this team needed to do. USC, Memphis, Northwestern, like a lot of these games, Georgia, a lot of these games, it didn't look like they knew who they wanted to be or knew who they were or knew what the best version of themselves was. And so, yeah, they beat Northwestern and they boat raced Washington. They lost to Memphis, lost to USC, lose by 12 at Georgia. Florida was even kind of a real struggle. Florida's a middle of the pack team, but at home, that Auburn was losing that game. And so I think what you've seen in this 4-game stretch is a team that's at least finding the things that they need to do to be successful, which is limit turnovers, be methodical at times on offense. Auburn scores 67 points. Generally, you go back and look at the teams, whether it's Jared, Bryce, some of those more high-powered teams, 67 points, they'd lose. I mean, they would, if they scored 67, they weren't playing the caliber of defense they are now. So this team is kind of finding its rhythm and figuring out, okay, it's going to start on defense and limiting turnovers and then go from there. And so that will bode well as you get into this tougher schedule, I think, even though, look, they're going to have bumps and bruises. They're going to lose some games for sure. But at least they're starting to find, okay, for us to be successful, it's going to take this, which is huge for a basketball team, whether it's chemistry, whether it's guys finding their role, or whether it's finding your identity. A team that has that, they can be less talented and still be a better team and win games because they know what they're trying to do. So I think it's huge what's happening these last 4 games. Wendell Green's been phenomenal. Another double-digit scoring night for him. Jalen Williams, another double-digit scoring night for him. You mentioned Janai Broom, and I think that's interesting. He had those 4 straight double-doubles, and then the last 2 games he's sort of quieted down against Mississippi State, LSU, and Auburn still wins. It's a good thing. Chris Moore hasn't played the last 2 games. Auburn still wins. So, there's some good things going on there. Look at stats from the LSU game, particularly last night. Another 20% shooting night from an opponent from 3. That's, I think, 4 of Auburn's 6 conference games. They're holding opponents from 3 to less than 20%. Florida, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and LSU all shot under 20% from 3 against Auburn. So that defense is doing its part. Wendell, we talked about being fantastic. Lior Berman comes off the bench with 8 points against LSU. Almost had double figures for the first time in his career. Alan Flanagan was on his way to a double-double, got in a little foul trouble. But more importantly with Al, 23 minutes, 1 turnover on the road against LSU.
Yep.
So there's some good things happening. What do you see? So when Chris Moore comes back,
for Wendell Green.
Do what? Yeah, Wendell Green, no turnovers.
Yeah, I think that's no turnovers. I was just adding that in. I think Alan Flanagan's turnover was the only turnover for the backcourt last night.
It's impressive. And I'd have to go back and look.
Impressive.
I remember writing about this like a week ago, and I'd have to go back and look game by game. But second half, they're a different team turnover-wise. I remember asking Bruce about it probably a week and a half ago because it was something I was noticing. They would turn the ball over. You go back to even maybe the USC game, but right past that, they would turn the ball over maybe 8-9 times in the first half, and then they were coming back in the second half, and it was maybe 3 or 4. They were kind of almost cutting their turnovers in half. And then they did it again last night. I think they had 4 turnovers in the second half, 6 in the first half. But they're doing a much better job because they're going towards their bench. Bruce is on that side. He can kind of control things offensively in the second half. But the second half turnovers are way, way down too. So if they can just – it's really about getting out of the gate sometimes with this team. Get out of the gate in a decent manner. Don't turn the ball over 9 times in the first half. In the second half, I think going towards the bench, they're in a much better position, and it's showing. They're playing good basketball.
Yeah, and like you were saying, it hasn't been against the best competition in the SEC, but at the same time, I think Mississippi State and Arkansas, those are 2 teams I see finishing in the top half of the league, and both of those teams potentially match up against Auburn really well. Arkansas has so much length on the perimeter. Mississippi State does as well. They also have Tolu Smith and more of an interior presence than Arkansas did. So I think those 2 wins carry a little more weight than where Arkansas and Mississippi State are currently trending, just because, everybody in the SEC is kind of reeling to an extent right now, feeling like they need some wins. Nobody's taken a night off. It doesn't seem like. It's just that teams haven't really found their offensive rhythm throughout the SEC right now. And I think that's something that's going to continue to happen. This is going to be a league where Auburn's going to be able to lean on its defense on nights when it can't shoot. And I think that's going to go a long way for Auburn being able to, you're going to have a lot of defensive battles in the SEC this season. If you can have a top 10-ish defense out there, you're going to win a lot of them. And I think that, Alabama has been a great shooting team, but outside of that, is anybody in the SEC, it's just going to be, I think that you're going to be able to hold a lot of teams to below 20% from 3. And those really poor shooting nights is going to be something that Auburn's defense can do. I'm still not sure how high Auburn can finish in the SEC, but right now they look like they have as good of a recipe currently as anybody. And like Justin was saying, they're still without Chris Moore, and Janai Brome's playing as quietly as he has been. And I think it's going to be interesting. And I do like the Lior Berman little arc we've got going on right now. Bruce Pearl was talking about a couple of, I don't remember if it was after the Mississippi State game or after the Ole Miss game, but he was saying that a lot of teams try to pick on Lior when he's in the game, and that Lior, I guess he's kind of not only taken that personally, but has used it, and they're working on it. You could tell that last night. I think there was one point where I don't remember if it was right after Lior's three or maybe it was after the play that after timeout they ran and got him that layup. But either way, it was after one of his baskets, and Mississippi State came down the court and immediately tried to attack Lior on a back cut, and Lior stole the pass. Stuff like that is promising with Lior as well. Not only does that mean that Auburn's going to be better while they don't have Chris Moore, but I think that when Chris Moore does come back, it's going to give you a little more versatility. Maybe Lior can play a couple of those minutes at the 2 or a couple of those minutes at the 3, and let Lior, or maybe Lior can play those minutes and let Chris Moore play some extra small ball 4 minutes to back up Jalen, and maybe that strengthens that position a little bit. Alan Flanagan's playing well as well. So I don't know. I think that the Lior development is an interesting one. If he can continue playing, if he can play 5 to 7 minutes a game at a true SEC level, that could be really big for this roster. Spread out that core starting 5/6 kind of players and get a little more production spread around.
Yeah, he played 16 minutes last night against LSU, 3 for 4 shooting, 8 points and a board. Yeah, and you're right. Look, he's a guy that when Chris Moore gets back healthy, we know that Chris Moore's minutes are going to go back and Berman's minutes are going to go back down. It would be interesting. The thing with Lior, though, is when he gets in there, you almost have to run a play or two for him to try to get a 3, because otherwise you're not, you're not going to get much from him. He benefited last night from playing 16 minutes and actually had a chance to get in the flow of the game a little bit and get an opportunity to do a couple of things. And he's a really good player. The only thing he probably lacks is, maybe some, if he gets matched up against a 6'6", some guy that's trying to go in the paint, maybe a little bit there. But he's a physical, strong guy. Lior is, and he's got good athletic ability to stay with somebody. And so it was good to see him hit that 3. He had a steal. He had a layup. He had another deflection against LSU on a backdoor. It was a heads up play. It was a good awareness play. It will be interesting to see if kind of what happens with his minutes when Chris Moore comes back, if he kind of dwindles back down, or do they think he's deserved a couple of more minutes, maybe another rotation in there. But if they do, like I said, if you're going to play Lior, then you got to get him a look. You can't. He's not a guy. If you're just going to put him out there for minutes, I mean, I get it. You got to do what you got to do. But when he's out there, boy, you really want to try to get him a look. And you could tell, by the way, against LSU, you could tell Bruce was really giving him a shot and was feeling that Lior was confident. So Lior hit that 3, and this was in the. Let's see, this would have been in the first half, late in the first half. Lior hits that 3. They come back down a few possessions after that, and they run a design play for Lior. He comes off a screen, comes up the middle, and is going to catch and try to get a look at the top of the key, curls around it, and he went up, but that guy was on him, and he ended up having to pass it off. But that was an absolute called design play for Lior Berman to get another look at the top of the key, which I thought was an interesting thing. I don't know how many times I've seen Bruce Pearl call a design play for Lior in the first half of an SEC basketball game. That was cool to see. I mean, I think Lior was confident, and Bruce wanted to feed him a little bit and see if he could knock another one down. And so, that'll be interesting to see how him and Chris Moore sort of their minutes, how their minutes shape out. But it was just a good game. We talked about road starts with Bruce, and he talked about needing to get off to a better start because Georgia, they trailed early and never recovered. Ole Miss were down 7 before they kind of got things going. Well, Zep Jasper hits a three 13 seconds into the game, and Auburn never trailed. So that's a pretty good way to get off to a good start on the road. The game was tied first 13 seconds of the game. Zep hits a three. Auburn never trails in the game. So that's more like it in terms of road starts. But yeah, you mentioned an interesting word, and it's recipe. And I agree with you. Like, that's a good way, recipe, identity. We're talking about the same thing in that it's just finding the things that work. The balance. Bruce Pearl talked about that win over LSU being a good win with good balance, which is true. I mean, Wendell and Jalen had 14. You look across the board, KD had 8, Lior had 8, Cardwell had 4, Broom had 4, Jasper had 5, Flanagan had 8. Trey Donaldson's the only player that played that didn't score. And he only took 1 shot, but he had 4 rebounds, Trey Donaldson did. And once again, no turnovers. Honestly, Janai kind of reverted back, and he had a rough game. Maybe KG Williams just kind of causes him some problems. 4.6 boards, 3 turnovers, 3 fouls for Janai. So probably his worst game in the league. And then Jalen had a couple turnovers, but other than that, just a ton of balance. I mean, even the rebounds. Trey Donaldson had 4, Cardwell had 7, Wendell had 4, Jalen Williams had 7, Janai had 6, Allen had 7. So, I mean, that going back to what Bruce Pearl said before the season started, that's what this team is. It's got to be the depth. Everybody's got to contribute. It's got to be 10 deep, and they've all got to do their part. You don't have a superstar. Wendell can look fantastic at times, but I wouldn't consider Wendell Jabari or Walker when we're talking about the superstar. But Wendell's probably, I say probably, I think Wendell's their best player. I mean, there's just so many things he does. He just creates and manipulates the game when he's playing really well. But this is a team that's got to be good across the board, 10 deep. Katie's got to contribute. Dylan's got to contribute. Janai, Zep, Flanagan, all these guys got to do their part. And when they do, it's a good basketball team. They just don't have a big margin of error. Yeah, you talked about league play. So Alabama's sitting at 6-0. Texas A&M's 5-0. They beat Florida last night by 2. And then you got Auburn and Tennessee at 5-1. And then literally you've got Georgia 3-2, Florida 3-3, Missouri 3-3, Kentucky 3-3, Vanderbilt 2-3. So the middle is just jam-packed. And then you've got South Carolina, LSU, Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Ole Miss all with 1 conference win. Auburn plays South Carolina Saturday. If they win that would mean that 5 of Auburn's 6 wins are against the bottom 5 teams in the league at this moment. So, but look, there's something to be said about taking care of business and winning the games that are in front of you. And for this Auburn team, it's not a bad thing. I mean, if you flip the schedule, think about the way this Auburn team was playing against Memphis, against USC. Flip this conference schedule, and then let's say they start league play with like 6 of 9 against quad 1. That would have been a bad deal for this team. This team wasn't in a good place for that. Like, if they'd have started conference play with Bama and Kentucky and Tennessee and toss in A&M or toss in, that would have been tough on this team when they're trying to find themselves. So the way the schedule kind of worked out, it's allowing them to find themselves a little bit, and then they're going to take whatever confidence they've got into this back half here soon and see what they've got. But, I mean, you're right. Looking at it, Alabama and Tennessee are clearly the best 2 teams in the league. If they don't finish 1-2, I'd be surprised. They're just top to bottom. They're just really, really good across the board. Tennessee's fantastic on defense. Alabama's fantastic all around. But those 2 teams, you got to figure over 18 games, you're going to finish 1-2. But after that, yeah, I mean, this Auburn team, the way it's shaken out, Arkansas is struggling right now. You didn't see that coming. I mean, they're gonna drop out of the top 25. I don't even know how they're still in it. I don't know how they were still in it going into this week. Honestly, they're 1-4, and they still hung around at 25. I don't really get that. But Auburn's got a great shot to when you're looking at the lay of the land to finish 3rd in the league. I just don't think they're going to hang with Bama. I think Bama and Tennessee are probably going to be probably maybe 4 at the most. Probably more like 3 conference losses for those teams. They're probably looking at 15-3 type seasons. Maybe 14-4 for Tennessee or something, or Alabama.
I'm not sold on Tennessee yet, but Alabama, so far looking like they're chugging away.
What are you not sold? So Tennessee, let's see, Mississippi State. I mean,
They've had some
times,
close games, and
yeah,
I'm not sold on their guard play and Ziegler, and just never really too sold on Rick Barnes. I'm sure that they're going to finish in that top 4, you know, area, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they finish at number 2. I just, I don't think they're in the tier that Bama's in either way. I
not
think
quite.
right now Alabama's in the first tier of the SEC, and Tennessee might be a little, they're probably a little bit ahead of Auburn, but at the same time, these past few Auburn wins I think are impressive, and Tennessee's had some skeptical ones, but Auburn's had the loss to Georgia too. So but I think that Tennessee and Alabama, definitely a division between those two right now.
Yeah, there's no question. Alabama separated themselves. I mean, Alabama's I don't know. I don't see how they're not the best team in the country right now. They're just playing so well. And you're right about
Yeah.
Tennessee. Like they're just one of those teams that at times they definitely underwhelm under Rick Barnes.
Yeah, they're good.
They're just so, I don't know. It's still such a physical team.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I wonder maybe I give them an edge over Auburn, whether it's Plavich or Plavicic or some of the other big men they have. A little bit more physical, I think, and tall down low versus Auburn. And so I would give them an edge in terms of just their team makeup and what they're capable of doing. And man, they play some nasty defense. Tennessee does. I mean, really lock you down at times. That when Auburn and Tennessee play, that's going to be just an absolute slugfest. It'll be the winning team will be at 63 or something, 62. I mean, but yeah, you got to love where Auburn's at through 15-3. Look, you lose Jabari Smith and you lose Walker Kessler, and you're 15-3 the next season. I mean, that's really, really impressive. And I said before SEC play started on the board at Auburn Live, I said I thought 5-3 through their first 8 games I thought would be acceptable. Of course, at the time it was Memphis had lost, the USC and Memphis losses had happened, and offensively they just weren't clicking. And so I'm looking at it going, kind of for what this team is, 5-3, because you're thinking Arkansas is really good. But now here they are 5-1. Well, now I'm looking at it completely different. I mean, now 5-3 is no. I mean, you're playing South Carolina, and then you play. Is it Missouri? Is that 8th?
I can't 100% remember.
A&M, Carolina, and then A&M, and then that finishes your your first 8. And now you're looking at A&M's really good. That's going to be that'll be a A&M always. That'll be a little revenge game from the SEC tournament. Bruce is going to want that game bad.
A&M's good though this year. It's going to be a.
So I mean, you're looking at take care of business South Carolina. You're 6-1, and got a chance to be 7-1 in your first 8, which is I wouldn't have seen that coming. 7-1, I would have thought maybe a couple. I would have thought probably 2 losses at best. And
I think it's kind of interesting how we were just talking about Tennessee and putting up the fact that Auburn, matches up in a lot of ways and probably stands a chance no matter where that game is played. But 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have given Auburn a chance in that game. And I think that now, Auburn has a route, has not an easy route, but has a, tangible route to get into that top 4, that first round bye in the SEC.
No doubt. Oh, no doubt. I mean, like we talked about, you're looking at it now going, if you assume Alabama and Tennessee are going to be in that top 4, which they will, probably top 2, I think. Yeah. A&M's off to a great start. Can they keep it up? Kentucky's always dangerous. I mean, the Kentucky's got the talent. Yeah. We all know that. They came back, beat Tennessee, come back and beat Georgia, who's a decent team so far. So Kentucky's playing a little better now. And then Arkansas is loaded if they can just figure it out. And so there's a couple teams, but I mean, as of right now, Kentucky's 2 games back, and Arkansas's 4 already of Auburn. So if Auburn wins these next 2 and they're sitting at 7-1, they're going to be in a pretty good spot to try to land one of those top 4 seeds, assuming they don't tank at the end, assuming they don't just lose to Tennessee twice and lose to Alabama twice and lose to Kentucky. They need to knock off and get a win over Tennessee or a win over Alabama, something of that caliber. But yeah, you look at KenPom, Auburn's up to 15. You look at the net, and Auburn is at 21. So after that Georgia loss, I'd have to go back and look, but I think after that Georgia loss, I think Auburn's net had dropped to like 40, something around 40.
Yeah, I think we're late 30s.
And now they've risen all the way back up to being 21, which is really impressive. Obviously, we'll see kind of how the quad 1 game shakes out. Auburn's schedule is going to be interesting at the end of the year because you're going to have Memphis, USC, Northwestern, Florida, Missouri, A&M. You're going to have a bunch of these teams that are going to just probably hovering around, 40 to 60. And so we talked about quad 1 wins. Some of those you get inside the top 50 for some of those. And so the better Memphis can do, the better USC can do, the better Missouri can do, the better Northwestern can do, that will help Auburn's quad 1. Like Auburn's quad 1, literally week by week, like once they get into the schedule, one week their quad 1 could be 4-1. And the next week, if a couple of those teams lose, it could be like, 2-3, and it's going to fluctuate, but they need some of those teams that are kind of right there in the middle of the pack to win. That would really help them. But yeah, they keep climbing. I think they're projected a 6 seed right now. The good thing about the back half of the schedule, Jay, is being so difficult is, yes, you're going to lose more games. Auburn's going to fall. Auburn's going to drop some of these games, right? There's no doubt about that. The good thing is, if you go and you lose to Alabama, your net and your KenPom is going to, if anything, it might go up.
Yep.
Even Tennessee, even losing to Tennessee. I mean, so yes, it's tough, and they're going to need to win some of those games, obviously. But man, if they can make hay in this first half, get to 7-1, maybe go to Morgantown. And West Virginia is a good team. I don't care what their record is. That's a good basketball team. If they get that non-conference win, yeah, that's going to be a brutal place. If you somehow can get that non-conference game, man, now like you could almost split the last 8 games of your schedule with as tough as it is. You could almost split those and finish 11-7 in league play, and you're in great shape. You're in, because that's going to be so tough.
Oh, yeah.
You're probably going to knock off somebody good, and you'll be in great shape, honestly, because it's such a tough schedule. Net wise, you might rise, like we talked about.
Yeah, I think so too, and that's I think that Auburn has a chance to win those games. I don't know how I feel about an Alabama game, especially in Tuscaloosa at this point, but there's maybe they can muck it up enough to make that one ugly, but we'll see.
I think in Auburn, that's gonna be a tough one in Tuscaloosa. In Auburn, they got a. I mean, Auburn can beat anybody in Neville Arena.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, that's gonna be it's gonna be a race, But Auburn can definitely. They need to get some of these big wins, though. That's been a talking point. Each of these past few games, it seems like that's what the announcers are talking about. I've seen Bruce Pearl talk about it as well, but Auburn does not have that marquee win, and that's not going to keep them out of the NCAA tournament. But getting a marquee win versus an Alabama or a Tennessee, especially those two, but in that win in Morgantown as well would be something that's like that. That just looks great on the tournament resume. That goes from they beat who they were supposed to beat, 6 or 7 seed, to bumping you up to that 4 or 5 maybe.
Yeah, it's you got and you got your chances. I mean, you play Tennessee and Alabama, obviously in at home. That's going to be your best shot. If they can win one of those, they play Tennessee and Alabama 4 times, right? Road and away. honestly, as good as those teams are, if they went 1-3, let's say they got swept by Bama but split with Tennessee, um, that'd be pretty good in the tournament seeding size. If
Yeah.
they had a win over one of those two teams and showed they could beat that caliber of team, especially if they beat Alabama at home, that'd be a monster win, and you could notch it. That'll be a big one when it comes to seeding too. Just having something on the resume that said you beat the number 1 or number 2 team in your league or a top 10 type net team or KenPom team. That'll be huge. All right, let's look ahead to South Carolina Saturday, and then Texas A&M next Wednesday night. It's now shaping up to be
Yep.
a big game.
Big one.
Texas A&M's got, let's see. By the way, Texas A&M and South Carolina, Auburn's next 2 games, they played each other on Saturday. Texas A&M went to Columbia. This is on the heels of South Carolina beating Kentucky in Rupp. And A&M goes to Columbia and beats South Carolina by 41. The same day Alabama beat LSU by 40. That makes no sense. How you get beat at home? How do you go to Rupp and win, come back at home and lose by 41? I have no clue. So I don't know what you're getting from South Carolina, and I don't know. In Texas A&M, they're just a tough team. Buzz Williams, they have always played Bruce Pearl really good. Always, even going back to the years when Auburn won the regular season and A&M was the only team to win in Neville for the entire season. And they just play them. They play Auburn really tough. And of course, last year in the tournament, he knows how to defend Bruce Pearl's teams. And so those are wars. But you look at A&M, 2-point win over Florida, crushed Carolina, beat Missouri by 18. When Missouri was ranked, beat Texas A&M. Beat LSU, and then squeaked by Florida for their 5-0 start. They play Kentucky in Rupp, and then come to Auburn. So they're going to be coming to Auburn after playing in Kentucky Saturday, travel back, then travel to Auburn. Auburn plays in Columbia and then comes home to play A&M. So what are your thoughts on the next 2 games with South Carolina on Saturday and Texas A&M next Wednesday night on ESPN2?
And South Carolina should be a win there. It's in Columbia, so it can always be tricky, but South Carolina is just a bad team. They're not very good this year. I think the win over Kentucky is more or less just Kentucky not being good than it is South Carolina doing anything special. That was just, I think Kentucky didn't care for it. It was sort of like Auburn's game against Georgia, but worse. South Carolina does have Gregory Jackson. Some Auburn fans will remember Bruce Pearl recruiting him. He was the number 1 player in 2023 before he reclassed to 2022. He's super good. He can go for 30 points any night kind of guy, but even if he goes for 30 points, they got Michi Johnson as well playing decently, but really nobody else on that team that's going to be a big threat to Auburn. They don't shoot well. They don't defend well. They're first year transitioning from Frank Martin, and it's just he didn't leave them with much, and there's not much going on over there. But they got enough talent to where if Auburn tries to play like they did at Georgia, Gregory Jackson and Michi Johnson might be able to outscore Auburn. Not likely, but it's possible. Texas A&M, whole different story though. You were saying Buzz Williams, he knows how to defend Bruce Pearl's teams. Not only that, but just on paper, that Texas A&M team does a lot of things that should frustrate Auburn. They're a really good rebounding team, especially on the offensive glass. They play extremely good interior defense, and they're gonna, make Auburn. If Auburn can shoot 40% from 3, like it kind of has been able to in these past few games, that could be, as always, something that swings it into Auburn's favor. But if not, that's going to be a really tough game for Auburn to win, even at home. I think Auburn can win it, of course, but Buzz Williams, always a tough matchup for Bruce Pearl, and I think this year it's going to be a little more so than usual.
Yeah, you look at South Carolina, boy. They have a 5-point loss at Vanderbilt. By the way, the game against Auburn is going to be their 3rd straight home game, which is interesting that you get 3 home games in a row in conference play. I'm not sure how they maneuvered that. But they had a 5-point loss to Vanderbilt. Then they played Tennessee at home and lost by 43. Then they turn around and go to Rupp and win. Don't know how. Then they come back home, play A&M, and lose by 41. This team has lost by 40 twice in conference play already in 5 games.
Yep.
But have a win at Rupp. That is, I mean, that just, you can't even.
I think
And then they have a 12-point
second
loss
worst.
to Ole Miss. What's up?
I think the second worst team in the SEC, according to Ken Palm, is Ole Miss maybe, and they're like number 97 or so, and then South Carolina's the worst, and they're like number 250.
Yeah,
Just to put in perspective how bad they've been.
that was surprising. I did look that up the other day when I was looking at the resume, and to see South Carolina in the 40s, I was like, whoa.
It's like a
You're thinking
SoCon team.
you're in the SEC, yeah, like we're okay. Maybe you're 240. I'm like, my gosh. I mean, you look at, just for perspective. Let's see, just for some comparison's sake. So I look at Torvik Analytics too. I like how they lay things out.
Mm-hmm.
So Winthrop is 266. Georgia State's 229. Holy crap.
Yep.
So just according to Torvik, South Carolina will be the second worst team Auburn's played all year behind only Texas Southern. They're sitting at 283 right now in the Torvik rankings, which is worse than Georgia State, which is worse than Winthrop. Wow. I mean, that's shocking.
Yeah, they're bad.
They're really bad. I mean, just to have 2 40-point losses is crazy. So it'll be interesting to see what that game looks like, because we know Auburn can go through stretches where if they don't hit shots, it can get ugly. You're talking about 2 straight road games, right? So Auburn traveled back last night. They're going to practice Thursday, or maybe some kind of light practice Thursday, probably a practice Friday morning, and then turn around and get right back on a plane and go to Columbia, or the bus and go to Columbia. So it will be interesting to see how Auburn handles the second straight road game. Similar maybe to that USC Washington back-to-back. I mean, they traveled in between games. But it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. And then what kind of Carolina team you get after now 3 straight home games. Can they put something together? But yeah, this is definitely a game that, I don't know about must wins. I hate saying must win. And like, if Auburn loses, what? They don't make the tournament? No. But
it's a can't lose.
Yeah, given what we know about Auburn's schedule, I mean, you almost can't lose this game. I mean, there's just too much going on in the back half to have a loss like this on your resume, or even a loss to LSU. Honestly, they just have to win these.
Yeah,
games.
it's not going to kill you, but it's just going to look terrible. It's going to hang over your head for the rest of the season.
Well, it's the kind of loss that you lose this, and then you lose your footing a little bit and backslide in the back half, and all of a sudden you become and the teams are, if somehow you were to slip to the bubble and they go, ooh, golly, they lost to South Carolina. They're 250, and that's when it comes into play. You'd have to you lose this game, you have to make up for it by beating Tennessee, Alabama. You got to make up for it on the back half with a win of that caliber. So, I think get another win, come home, play A&M, 8:00 on ESPN2 that Wednesday night. Better be packed inside Neville, because that'll be a monster game against Texas A&M. At that point, you have a chance to move to, second in the league, depending on, Tennessee's got LSU and Georgia, so they're probably going to go 2-0. Georgia's in Knoxville, so you got to think Tennessee will probably go 2-0 and be and probably be 7-1. And then Alabama's got Missouri and Mississippi State. So you've got to figure they're going to be 8-0. So that win over A&M for Auburn could be a chance to stay tied for second at 7-1 with Tennessee. So big game, couple big games ahead, and they go to Morgantown, and then things get crazy. So, but all in all, good start for this Auburn team. They're positioning themselves well to make the NCAA tournament. Just got to keep winning these games, keep finding themselves a little bit. I think they're doing a really good job of doing all that. You're going to have a Carolina primer.
Yep.
Saturday morning.
Yeah, Saturday morning for that one, and the breakdown this afternoon.
That's right. So keep an eye on auburnlive.com, and Jay will have a breakdown of the win over LSU, and then a primer on Saturday morning as Auburn plays South Carolina in Columbia. I don't know the last time they played in Columbia, but Auburn's gone up there and blown them out a few times in Columbia.
And had some pretty bad, that was the loss with the Anthony McLemore injury, and there was another loss there too at one point that was just really weird. I don't remember which team it was.
That was a tough one.
Yeah.
It's
been some weird games in South Carolina, though.
Yeah, Auburn's won 5 straight in the series, including the last 2 times in Columbia. I think that was the COVID year with Sharif. They scored 109.
Yeah.
2021,
yep,
they went up there and just scored unbelievable. And then the next year, they went up there again, won 81-66, 21-22. I guess last year they went up there and won 81-66. Yeah, you're right there. Oh, you know what you're thinking of? I think you're thinking of that 18-19 game. They lost by 3. Yeah. That was Auburn's Final Four team.
Yeah.
And they were ranked 16th. It's kind of funny. Yeah, lost 80-77. They got down 17 points in the second half. No, I'm sorry.
Chris Silva teams would just destroy Auburn, though.
Who was it?
Chris Silva. That was their center back then. He would just beat Auburn to death down low.
He was sick. Yeah. Yeah, Austin Wiley was out. Yeah, Chris. Yeah, you nailed it. You know what Chris Silva did that game? This is the
final 30-point game.
32-14.
I think he might have hit like a shot at the very, 5 seconds left or something that kind of sealed the game for him as well.
Well, if I remember right, they hit a corner 3. There was a tie game, and
maybe that's what it was.
They just hit some corner 3, and you're like, it was almost South Carolina's Felipe Haas knocked down a 3-point shot on the next possession to put the Gamecocks in front. And then the rough game. Austin Wiley wasn't there, and Auburn went there. So yeah, you're right. And they've had a couple games. They lost by 3. The time before that, I think it was the McLemore 17-18 game. They lost by 9. But as of late, they've had South Carolina's number going back to the SEC tournament. They won.
Yep.
They won in Nashville, and then they won by 13. They won by 20 plus. They won by 15, and then they won by 11 last year. So, double-digit wins in the last 4 games against South Carolina. So they've kind of had their number as of late. I was looking at that game last year. So the game last year clinched the SEC title for Auburn. It was played in March 5th. It clinched the SEC championship for Auburn, regular season championship. That was a game where they were up 17 at halftime and then kind of just coasted. South Carolina outscored them in the second half, but they coasted and won by 11. But yeah. So Auburn's going for 5 straight in that series. No, 6 straight in that series. In the South Carolina series. So, okay. All right. Well, let's get out of here. Look for Jay's stuff at auburnlive.com. If you're not a subscriber, go subscribe. It's $29.99 until next August, the end of August. So subscribe now, $29, $30. That gets you access through football camp, and leading up to literally the first game of Hugh Freeze's first season at Auburn. So pretty good deal. For Jay, I'm Justin, auburnlive.com. Go subscribe. Go subscribe to YouTube. Hit the notifications. That helps. That's what Zach in the back tells me. That's all I'm going to say is right. And then we'll talk to you after Auburn's game against A&M next Wednesday, and we'll catch up with you then. See ya.